There exists a moment that haunts every living soul, a question that echoes in the darkest corners of human consciousness, in that fraction of a second when the heart stops beating, when the lungs draw their final breath, when consciousness begins to fade. Does the soul know? Does it understand what has just happened? Edgar Cayce knew the answer, and what he discovered would challenge everything humanity believed about death. Picture this. A man lies dying in a hospital bed. His family surrounds him, tears streaming down their faces. The monitors flatline, the doctors pronounce the time. But something extraordinary is happening that no one in that room can see. The man's consciousness hasn't vanished. It hasn't dissolved into nothingness. Instead, it's experiencing something that would terrify most people to learn. He is watching. He is aware. He is more alive than he has ever been. This isn't fiction. This isn't religious dogma. This is what Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, witnessed thousands of times during his remarkable trances. What he revealed about the moments after death would forever change how we understand the journey of the soul. From his childhood in Kentucky, Cayce possessed an extraordinary gift. When he entered his deep sleep states, his voice would change, his breathing would slow, and he would speak from a place beyond ordinary consciousness. Medical doctors, scientists, and skeptics came from around the world to witness these sessions. What they heard defied explanation. Cayce described the exact moment of death with startling clarity. He spoke of a silver cord, an energetic connection between the physical body and the soul, that gradually loosens as death approaches. He watched as consciousness began to separate from flesh, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. But unlike the peaceful transition many imagine, Cayce revealed something far more complex. The dying person experiences a peculiar sensation of expansion. Their awareness suddenly extends beyond the boundaries of their physical form. They can perceive the room from multiple angles simultaneously. They hear not just with their ears, but with their entire being. Thoughts of others become tangible, almost visible. Colors appear that have no names in human language. Sounds emerge that no earthly ear could detect. And then comes the moment of separation. The silver cord snaps. The soul is free. But freedom brings its own terror. The newly departed soul finds itself in a state of hyper-awareness that would overwhelm any living mind. Every memory, every emotion, every sensation from their entire life floods back simultaneously. Time loses its meaning. Past, present, and future blend into a single eternal now. The dead don't just know they're dead. They experience death in ways that would shatter our understanding of reality itself. And according to Cayce, the first moments after death are nothing, like what religions have taught us. There are no pearly gates, no immediate judgment, no sudden darkness. Instead, there's confusion. Profound, overwhelming confusion. Most souls, Cayce discovered, don't immediately realize they've died. They hover above their bodies, trying desperately to communicate with loved ones who can no longer hear them. They reach out to touch, to comfort, to explain that they're still here, still conscious, still themselves. But their hands pass through everything they try to grasp. This is the first shock of death, the realization that you exist without a body, that you're more awake than you've ever been, yet completely invisible to the world you once knew. Cayce witnessed souls attempting to operate physical objects, turning doorknobs, picking up phones, embracing their grieving relatives. Each failed attempt deepens their confusion. They scream, but no sound emerges. They weep, but no tears fall. They exist in a strange limbo between the physical and the spiritual, fully conscious but utterly powerless to affect the material world. Some souls remain in this state for what feels like eternity, though earthly time may have barely passed. They follow their bodies to the morgue, to the funeral home, to the cemetery. They watch their own funerals with a mixture of fascination and horror. They see who truly mourns them and who merely performs grief. They hear every word spoken about them, every secret revealed, every truth finally admitted. And in these moments something profound begins to dawn on them. They are not their body. They never were. The flesh was merely a temporary vessel, a suit worn for a brief journey through physical existence. The real self, the consciousness, the soul, the eternal essence, remains intact, aware and astonishingly alive. Edgar Cayce called it the grey field, that strange twilight realm where newly departed souls find themselves trapped between two worlds. It's neither heaven nor hell, neither light nor darkness. It's a place of shadows and echoes where the dead must confront the most terrifying truth of all. They are exactly who they were in life, only now without the mask of flesh to hide behind. This grey realm isn't a physical location, but a state of consciousness. Cayce described it as a dimension that exists parallel to our own, separated by the thinnest of veils. It's a place where thought becomes substance, where emotion takes form, where the inner landscape of the soul manifests as external reality. If a person lived in fear, the grey field appears threatening and dark. If they lived in confusion, it seems maze-like and disorienting. If they lived in anger, it feels hostile and oppressive. The newly dead find themselves in an environment that perfectly mirrors their internal state. There are no external judges here, no punishing deities, no rewarding angels. The soul becomes its own judge, jury, and executioner, or its own savior. In this grey twilight, Cayce witnessed souls wandering in confusion, some for days, others for years in earthly time. They carried with them every emotion, every regret, every unfinished business from their physical existence. But now these feelings weren't filtered through a brain or nervous system. They were raw, pure, overwhelming in their intensity. Cayce observed souls reliving their most powerful memories, not as distant recollections but as vivid, present-moment experiences. A harsh word spoken decades ago would replay with all its original venom. A kindness shown to a stranger would radiate with unexpected warmth. Every significant moment of their life existed simultaneously in this grey space, creating a cacophony of experience that many souls found unbearable. The souls who struggled most were those who had lived without spiritual awareness. They clung desperately to their earthly identity, unable to accept that their physical life had ended. Cayce saw them attempting to return to their homes, to interact with their possessions, to resume their daily routines. They were ghosts in the truest sense, not supernatural entities, but confused consciousness unable to let go. He described watching a businessman who had died suddenly of a heart attack. The man spent what seemed like months in the grey field, trying to get to his office, to check his stocks, to close one more deal. He couldn't understand why his secretary couldn't see him, why his phone calls wouldn't connect, why his computer wouldn't respond to his touch. His entire identity had been wrapped up in his work, and without it he didn't know who he was. Another soul, a mother who had devoted her life to her children, remained in the grey field trying to care for them. She would attempt to cook their meals, help with homework, tuck them into bed. The pain of watching her children grieve while being unable to comfort them created a loop of suffering that kept her trapped in the twilight realm. But then something remarkable would happen. A presence would appear. Not an angel in the traditional sense, but a guide, often someone the soul had known in life, someone who had already made this journey. These guides didn't force or command. They simply offered understanding, patience, and, most importantly, recognition. Sometimes the guide would be a grandparent who had passed years before, sometimes a childhood friend, sometimes even a beloved pet. The form didn't matter as much as the feeling of familiarity, of unconditional love, of being truly seen and accepted. These guides understood the confusion, the fear, the disorientation of the newly dead, because they had experienced it themselves. "You are known here," they would communicate without words. "You are remembered, you are not lost." The communication in the grey field transcended language. Thoughts were transmitted directly, soul to soul, carrying not just information, but the full, emotional and spiritual context. A single exchange could convey what would take hours to explain in earthly words. It was in these moments that souls would begin to understand the true nature of their situation. The grey field wasn't a punishment or a purgatory, it was a decompression, chamber for consciousness, a place where the soul could gradually release its attachment to physical existence and prepare for what came next. The guides would gently help the soul recognize patterns from their earthly life. They would show how certain fears had shaped their experiences, how unresolved conflicts had created recurring problems, how missed opportunities for love and forgiveness had left wounds in their spiritual body. This wasn't done to induce guilt, but to promote understanding. Cayce described how some souls would suddenly experience a shift in perception. The grey would begin to lighten, the confusion would start to clear, and then would come the moment that changed everything, the life review. This wasn't judgment in the traditional religious sense. There was no deity sitting on a throne, weighing good against evil. Instead, the soul would experience its entire life from a completely new perspective, not just through its own eyes, but through the eyes of everyone it had ever encountered. The preparation for this review was crucial. The guides would help the soul understand that they were about to experience truth in its purest form. Every illusion would be stripped away. Every justification would crumble. Every hidden motivation would be revealed. But this wasn't meant to punish. It was meant to heal. As the grey field began to dissolve, replaced by a growing luminescence, the soul would feel a mixture of anticipation and dread. They were about to see themselves as they truly were, to understand the real impact of their earthly existence. They were about to experience the most profound education of their eternal journey, and in that light, in that moment of absolute truth, the real journey of the afterlife would begin. What Edgar Cayce revealed next would sound like science fiction to many, yet it aligned with ancient wisdom traditions from around the world. After the life review, souls didn't simply ascend to heaven or descend to hell. Instead, they embarked on what Cayce called planetary sojourns, journeys through different levels of consciousness that corresponded to the planets of our solar system. But these weren't physical journeys through space. The planets, in Cayce's vision, were symbolic representations of different aspects of spiritual development. Each planet embodied specific lessons, challenges, and opportunities for growth. The soul would be drawn to whichever planetary influence matched its current state of spiritual evolution. The transition to these planetary realms was unlike anything the soul had experienced before. Cayce described it as a dissolution of form followed by a reconstitution in a new vibrational frequency. The soul would feel itself expanding beyond all previous boundaries, becoming one with cosmic forces it had only dimly sensed during earthly life. Yet paradoxically, this expansion brought greater self-awareness, not less. Mercury represented the realm of mind and communication. Souls who had struggled with truth, who had used words to harm or deceive, would find themselves in Mercury's influence. Here they would experience the power of thought in its pure form, understanding how mental energy shapes reality itself. They would learn that in the spirit realm, thought is action, intention is creation, and deception is impossible. In Mercury's sphere, Cayce witnessed souls experiencing their every word, every thought, every communication from their earthly life. As living entities, lies appeared as dark, twisted forms that the soul had to untangle. Truth manifested as brilliant geometries of light. Souls discovered that every unkind word had created a wound in the fabric of consciousness itself, wounds they now had to heal. Through understanding and forgiveness. The learning in Mercury wasn't passive. Souls actively engaged in what Cayce called thought construction, the ability to create reality through focused intention. They practiced forming thoughts of pure clarity, watching as these thoughts took shape in the malleable substance of the Mercury realm. They learned that confused thinking created chaotic realities, while clear intention brought harmony and beauty. Venus embodied love and relationships. Souls drawn to Venus's sphere would confront their capacity for both selfish and selfless love. They would relive every relationship, understanding how their actions either nurtured or wounded others. In Venus's realm, the artificial barriers between souls dissolved, and they experienced the profound interconnectedness of all consciousness. Cayce described the Venus experience as one of emotional transparency. Souls could no longer hide their true feelings behind social masks. Every emotion was visible, radiating from them in waves of color and sensation. Those who had loved selfishly experienced the suffocating nature of possessive attachment. Those who had loved freely felt the expansive joy of unconditional acceptance. In Venus, souls often encountered those they had loved on Earth, not just from their most recent life, but from multiple incarnations. They discovered that many relationships spanned centuries, with souls playing different roles in each other's development. The mother who had been overprotective might meet the child she had stifled, now appearing as a teacher, helping her understand. The difference between love and control. Mars represented conflict and courage. Here, souls faced their unresolved anger, their abandoned battles, their fears left unconquered. But Mars wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding the true nature of strength. Souls learned that real power comes not from domination, but from the courage to face one's own shadows. In the Mars realm, Cayce witnessed what he called warrior training of the soul. Fears took physical form, towering shadows that souls had to confront directly. But as they faced these fears, souls discovered that the shadows had no real substance. They were projections of the mind, given power only by avoidance. The moment a soul turned to face its fear with genuine courage, the shadow would often transform into a teacher or guide. Those who had been violent in life experienced violence from the victim's perspective, feeling every blow they had dealt, every pain they had inflicted. But this wasn't torture, it was education. They learned that violence only perpetuates cycles of harm, that true strength lies in breaking these cycles through understanding and compassion. Jupiter, the sphere of wisdom and expansion, drew souls who had been teachers, leaders, or seekers of truth. In Jupiter's influence, consciousness expanded beyond individual concerns to embrace universal principles. Souls here didn't just learn, they became living libraries of wisdom, preparing to guide others on their journeys. Cayce described Jupiter as a realm of infinite libraries and halls of learning. But these weren't buildings with books. They were states of consciousness where knowledge existed as direct experience. A soul wanting to understand the nature of music wouldn't read about it, but would become music itself, experiencing the mathematical harmonies that underlie all creation. In Jupiter, souls often underwent what Cayce called consciousness expansion exercises. They would merge temporarily with larger and larger systems, first understanding a single life form, then an ecosystem, then a planet, then a solar system. This expansion taught them that individual consciousness was not separate from universal consciousness, but was like a wave that could expand to become the ocean itself. Saturn, perhaps the most challenging sphere, represented karma and discipline. Cayce described it as a place of profound reckoning, where souls confronted the lessons they had avoided in life. Saturn's influence was like a cosmic mirror, reflecting back to each soul the exact consequences of their choices. But again, this wasn't punishment. It was opportunity. Every karmic debt could be understood, accepted, and ultimately transcended. The Saturn experience was often the most difficult for souls. Here, they couldn't avoid or rationalize their failures. Every broken promise, every avoided responsibility, every karmic debt appeared as a tangible reality that had to be addressed. Cayce saw souls literally carrying the weight of their unresolved karma, manifested as burdens that grew heavier with denial and lighter with acceptance. But Saturn also offered the greatest liberation. As souls faced their karma directly, understanding the lessons within each challenge, they experienced profound release. Karmic patterns that had bound them for centuries could be dissolved in moments of genuine understanding and forgiveness. The outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, represented even higher levels of spiritual evolution. Uranus embodied sudden awakening and revolutionary change. Souls in Uranus's influence experienced reality-shattering revelations that completely transformed their understanding of existence. Old beliefs crumbled instantly, replaced by cosmic perspectives that the soul had never imagined possible. Neptune represented mystical union and the dissolution of individual ego. Here, souls experienced what Cayce called the Great Merging, a state where individual identity became fluid, able to blend with other consciousness while maintaining its unique essence. This wasn't loss of self, but expansion of self to include all. Pluto, the most distant and mysterious, was described by Cayce as the point of ultimate transformation, where souls faced the choice to return to Earth or continue their journey into higher dimensions. In Pluto's realm, souls confronted the deepest mysteries of existence itself. They stood at the threshold between the known and the unknowable, between individual consciousness and cosmic consciousness. Cayce emphasized that these planetary sojourns weren't sequential or hierarchical. A soul might visit several planetary influences in a single journey, or spend eons in one sphere before moving to another. The path was determined not by external rules but by the soul's own needs and readiness for growth. Each planetary experience offered exactly what the soul required for its next stage of evolution, preparing it either for return to Earth or for ascension to higher realms of existence. Perhaps the most shocking revelation in Cayce's vision was that reincarnation wasn't mandatory. It was a choice. After experiencing the planetary sojourns, after gaining understanding of their karmic patterns and spiritual lessons, souls faced a momentous decision: return to Earth for another incarnation or continue evolving in the spiritual realms. Cayce witnessed these decision-making processes during his trances, and what he saw defied conventional religious teachings. Souls didn't return to Earth as punishment for past sins. They returned out of love, out of a desire to complete unfinished work, to fulfill promises made to other souls, or to contribute to humanity's evolution. The process of choosing a new life was deliberate and purposeful. Souls would gather with their guides and what Cayce called the Council of Elders, highly evolved beings who helped plan incarnations. Together, they would review potential life circumstances, choosing parents, locations, and life challenges that would best serve the soul's growth. Every difficulty, every handicap, every advantage was selected with purpose. A soul might choose to be born into poverty to learn compassion, or into wealth to learn responsibility. Physical disabilities weren't punishments, but opportunities to develop inner strength. Even traumatic experiences were sometimes chosen as catalysts for spiritual awakening. Cayce revealed that souls often incarnated in groups, maintaining connections across multiple lifetimes. The person who was your mother in one life might be your child in the next. Enemies could become lovers. Teachers could become students. These soul groups worked together across centuries, helping each other evolve through different roles and relationships. The preparation for incarnation was meticulous. Souls would study the astrological conditions of their birth moment, understanding how planetary influences would shape their personality and life path. They would review the genetic lineage of their chosen family, seeing how ancestral patterns would influence their development. They would even glimpse key moments in their future life, not as fixed destiny, but as probable opportunities for growth. But perhaps most remarkably, Cayce revealed that souls retained a connection to this planning process even after birth. Deep in the subconscious mind, every human carried the memory of why they chose this life, what lessons they came to learn, what gifts they came to share. This explained why certain experiences felt fated, why some relationships seemed destined, why specific challenges kept recurring until they were resolved. The veil of forgetfulness that descends at birth wasn't a cruel trick. It was a necessary condition for authentic growth. If humans remembered their spiritual origins too clearly, they might not fully engage with earthly life. The challenge was to rediscover spiritual truth through human experience, to choose love despite fear, to seek truth despite illusion. In his deepest trances, Edgar Cayce penetrated beyond the cycles of death and rebirth to glimpse what he called the ultimate reality. What he saw there transcended all religious dogma, all philosophical systems, all human concepts of divinity. He saw that consciousness itself was the fundamental fabric of existence, and that every individual soul was both a unique expression and an inseparable part of this cosmic consciousness. The journey through death, through the planetary sojourns, through multiple incarnations, all of it was leading to a single realization. Separation is illusion. The belief that we are isolated individuals, cut off from each other and from the divine, is the source of all suffering. Death, in its deepest purpose, is the experience that begins to dissolve this illusion. Cayce described meeting souls who had completed their earthly journeys, who had learned all the lessons physical incarnation could teach. These beings hadn't ceased to exist. They had become more than individual consciousness. They had merged with what Cayce called the creative forces, or the universal consciousness, while somehow maintaining their unique spiritual identity. These evolved souls didn't rest in eternal bliss. They became active participants in creation itself. Some served as guides for souls still journeying through incarnations. Others worked with the evolution of entire planetary systems. Some focused their consciousness on inspiring human progress, sending waves of innovation, compassion, and wisdom into the collective human mind. Cayce revealed that every human prayer, every meditation, every moment of genuine spiritual seeking created connections to these higher realms. The barrier between the living and the dead, between earth and the spiritual dimensions, was far more permeable than most people realized. Thoughts and love transcended death. Consciousness remained connected across all dimensions. The most profound truth Cayce shared was this: death is not real in the way humans understand it. It's not an ending, but a transformation. It's not a loss, but a liberation. It's not separation, but a return to greater unity. The shock isn't that the dead know they're dead. It's that they discover they were never truly alive in the limited way they believed. Every soul, Cayce insisted, would eventually awaken to this truth. There was no eternal damnation, no souls lost forever. There was only the journey home taken at each soul's own pace, through experiences chosen with divine wisdom. Even the darkest soul carried within it the spark of the divine, waiting to be rekindled. The afterlife wasn't a distant realm waiting for us after death. It was here, now, interpenetrating our physical world, separated only by the limitations of physical perception. The dead weren't gone. They were simply operating at a different frequency of consciousness. And sometimes, in moments of deep love, profound grief, or spiritual openness, the veil would thin, and the two worlds would touch. This was Edgar Cayce's ultimate message. We are eternal beings having a temporary human experience. Death is merely the moment when we remember what we truly are. The dead don't just know they're dead. They know they're eternal. They know they're loved. They know they're part of something infinitely greater than their individual existence. And, perhaps most importantly, they know they're coming home. Death is only passing through God's other door. Edgar Cayce. The evidence Cayce provided through thousands of documented readings offers hope to all who have lost loved ones, to all who fear death, to all who wonder about the meaning of existence. The dead are not lost. They are not suffering. They are continuing their eternal journey, guided by love, sustained by purpose, destined for reunion with the source of all consciousness, and they're waiting, with infinite patience and boundless love, for the day when we too will pass through. that doorway and remember who we really are.